So how do you be real? How do you become salty? You are the salt of the earth, but what good is salt if it's lost its saltiness? How can you make it salty again? It's going to be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. How do you get salty? You know, this lesson today from Sermon on the Mount, we're studying Emmet Fox's book, is all about being authentic, being real, making the inside and the outside one, moving past religion into spirituality, religiosity into experience, moving from all the outer observances that keep us stuck and keep us comfortable and make us feel better than and more than. What passes for spirituality? You know, I don't want to get too personal with anything around here, but my daughter told me that at her high school, if you want to buy drugs, you go to the nearby church, because that's where all the dealers go. What's that about? But before we point fingers out there, there's always a struggle within each one of us to make the inside and the outside congruent. Congruent. What's congruent? You remember that in math in high school. It's like. Make them equivalent. Make them in alignment. So how do I align with my inner spirituality and make that a part of me? Jesus said you got to wash the inside of the cup, not just the outside. Don't just do the outer observances, but get in touch with something that's real, that's inside. But we struggle with that, and we have problems in our culture. Again, the worst family abuse statistically exists in one of the most traditional and conservative religious communities in the United States. And I love this city. It's Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's wonderful. But the statistics are there. Now, I grew up in probably the most permissive place in the United States, the San Francisco Bay Area. I don't remember seeing strip clubs except for in the area where the tourists went. Why? Because people weren't trying to put on a show. I don't get too wrapped up in this, but think about it. You know, when Lynn went to college, she was given a dorm roommate who was from an extremely old-fashioned, small farm town, and she was scared to death because they assigned her as a roommate somebody from the big city of Des Moines. And heaven knows if her high school years were like this, what would this person bring to the table? What Lynn brought to the table was a very sheltered life and a state of utter shock and horror to hear about what they were doing out there in the sticks. But they went to church every Sunday. So this is a struggle. Now, okay, what about it in here? How do we get the inside and the outside in alignment? How do we? Well, by making the things that we profess and experience not just something we believe in. How do you experience it? Well, you pray, you meditate, you try to live from something deeper and higher. You get salty. You get salty, you get real, you get authentic, and you let your light shine. See, last week we were talking about the Beatitudes, and that was the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. The Beatitudes are all about how to deal with life's problems and live your life unconditionally, good, bad, and in between. Lifting up into that higher place and then expanding out into a more spacious place in your life. And then when you do that, this week is about how do you show up in the world? How do you live an authentic life, and in his culture, in a culture that had all of these rules. You would not believe the rules they had to deal with. In order to be observant in his culture, you had to, well, like for instance on the Sabbath, if somebody had a wound or a cut, you could put a bandage on the wound, but you couldn't put anything that might kill the infection, because it would be considered working on the Sabbath. They would have debates among the rabbis whether you could pick up your baby if the baby was crying, because picking up something was working. I mean, what could you do? What happens if your animal falls into a ditch? Can you pull him out? And Jesus over and over and over again broke the literal laws of his culture in order to teach them that there was something higher and better, that the spiritual law, that the inner essence was more important. But here, in this lesson, this Sermon on the Mount, this teaching, he's talking about moving past the observant religiousness. I'm going to read from Gandhi here, and I think I've shared before. Gandhi's two favorite scriptures were the Bhagavad Gita and the Sermon on the Mount, and they said the same thing, one poetically, one scientifically. But he said this: the message of Jesus, as I understand it, is contained in the Sermon on the Mount, unadulterated when you take it as a whole. If then I had to face only the Sermon on the Mount and my own interpretation of it, I would not hesitate to say, oh yes, I'm a Christian. But I have to tell you that in my humble opinion, what passes as Christianity is a negation of the Sermon on the Mount. Be salty, be authentic, be real. You know, when I was, just before I entered ministerial school, I had a roommate downstairs who was the youth minister of a local Baptist church. And he and I loved the same kind of music, we had the same interests, we had the best times. He was my best friend, but we never talked about religion because he knew that what I believed was really permissive, and he just didn't, it was anything goes. Today, he is a practicing Buddhist who attends Mass with his wife. And he understands that spirituality is an experience, because he kept growing and he kept growing and he kept growing and he kept growing, and he couldn't contain it within a box of his own beliefs. But that's true for you and me as well. We get smug and caught up in our own beliefs. We think, okay, I've made it. I'm metaphysical. I'm more metaphysical than thou. I have an understanding. I memorized the 12 powers. I've got it made. But it's always a challenge, isn't it? To get this stuff and put it to work. To be salty. To be the salt of the earth. What does he mean, salty? Jesus was such a great poet. He was a lot of things. He was a mystic. He was a rabbi, a teacher. He was a great spiritual being. He was wonderfully evolved. All these things. We put all these labels on him. But you know what he was too? He was a poet. He was a poet, and here he's using poetry, and he was such a great poet. Be the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth. What good is salt if it's lost its savor, its saltiness? Can you make it salty again? It'll be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. Try to be salty. Try to be real. There's some salty people. I grew up in a neighborhood in Oakland, California. The world headquarters of the Hells Angels was a block and a half from my elementary school, okay? I used to wait on Sonny Barger and Tiny in my dad's hardware store, and my dad's top two accounts were the Our Lady's home across the street, the convent, and the Hells Angels were his second. Guess which one he liked waiting on more? He said they were a lot easier to deal with. They used to come and hang out with him in the back. They were salty people. I'm not saying that we should emulate, but we've seen this. We know this. Being real, being authentic, being who you are. I had a friend of mine, half joking, say to me a few years ago, I've been myself. You have to be yourself. And I've been myself for about a year now, and I'm starting to like it. And I laugh, but I see what they're talking about. What self are they being? The inner self. The inner self. But we think, I want to be spiritual. I'm tired of that stuff that I've been doing. I'm going to be spiritual. And then we try to be Brother Teresa, or, we paste onto ourselves the outer things instead of understanding it's an inner experience, letting it out, letting it become a real part of us. What is the self that we become and we express? It's who we were in the beginning. It's always inside of us, and it's just covered over with a whole bunch of observances, including our religious and spiritual observances, including what we think is important and real. If you're really on the spiritual path, you're going to be drawn up short and shocked over and over and over again because your assumptions get challenged and challenged and challenged. But I don't like that. I would have come to church and sit down and sing the hymns I always sang and do the things I always did and say my singing. I got my daily word. I say my daily word. And then I shut it up and I go. And instead of moving with it, letting your assumptions be broken, breaking what you thought was real, what you thought was true, moving past it, standing up for who and what you are. You know, Harry Truman said that his father told him, when you hear your neighbor praying too loudly, go back home and lock up your smokehouse. You know, moving past the outer religiosity and maybe being willing to take a risk and make a mistake and maybe fail. Maybe not do the right thing, but learn from it. Maybe forgive yourself and not hold yourself so tight and not hold yourself back and say, oh, I'm not going to take any risks because what if I make a mistake? Oh, this is a forgiving universe. You have made lots of mistakes. You will make infinite mistakes more, and you're just going to keep on growing and growing and growing. I'm just going to keep on growing and growing and growing. Together? I'm just going to keep on growing and growing and growing. Remember what St. Augustine, who was a rather traditional fellow, said? He said the law is contained within this. Love, and then do what you will. Love, and then do what you will. That was Jesus and his teachings, and we're going to go on as we go through what we're studying today. Understanding, he said, he's the fulfillment of the law. The fulfillment of the law is love. And then do what you will. If you're in touch with that one commandment, they ask him, well, what's the great commandment? He says, love. Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor, love yourself. Love. And then what happens? Well, then you kind of get into alignment with that love. You let that love flow through you. It becomes a living experience, and you start to live a different kind of life. There was a girl in the Youth of Unity years ago who was very structured, and no fault. She was a wonderful girl, just wonderful. But she was the head of her region, and her sponsor was Leilani Bird, was her sponsor, and told her to call me because she said there's no step-by-step instructions on how I'm supposed to be the head of this region, and I want to do it right. And I said, well, pray, and then just get silly. Pray and get silly, meaning love and do what you like. Get in touch with the essence of your being. And by the way, we did implement training, and we did because she had a legitimate concern, but she wanted to replace her own imagination, her own creativity, with maybe somebody else telling her how to do it right. But we did provide the structure necessary, but still, pray and get silly. Love and do what you like. Get in touch with that inner essence. This lesson today is all about making your outer world in congruence with the inner experience. So, you are the light of the world. A city on a hilltop cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, you place the lamp up on a lampstand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine forth for everyone to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. How are you letting your light shine? Well, he says, let your good deeds shine out. Good deeds. Well, we think good deeds, again, is those righteous deeds, those churchy deeds, those spiritual deeds. But the word good here, there's two words in Greek for good. One was that kind of good. The other is attractively beautiful. And that's the word he used. That entices people. You know, I remember a woman who was, in my very first church, we had a woman who went away to a spiritual retreat, came back, and she was totally different. Totally different. And I went, wow, what did you do? So I went on that spiritual retreat because she was just like, she had been kind of a meek, mild, and she was just out of herself. And I'm going to learn this thing. Edwene Gaines, 15 years ago, closer to 20 years ago now, I'd known her for so many years, for decades. We were classmates. And she showed up at my church, and she was like a different person. Oh my gosh. I mean, I always liked her, but she was like complete. I said, what did you do? And she said, well, let me tell you. And she'd done some inner child work. And so I went and spent a week, and I did some inner child work. It's letting your light shine so that people will see, and then maybe not trying to convert people, not trying to tell people what to do, but letting your light shine in such a way that maybe they might want to emulate you. Maybe they might want to say, I'll have what he's having. And follow along with that. So how do you let your light shine? Where in your life? What is the intersection in your life between these three things? Your spiritual growth, the needs of people around you, and the divine plan. Where in your life? And this isn't some grandiose thing that you're supposed to change your career or whatever, but changing your attitude, your mindset toward what you're doing. Where in your life can you show up in such a way that it is the intersection between your spiritual growth, the needs of the people around you, and the divine plan? You know, I remember years ago, my mom was really feeling kind of empty and purposeless. She was, you know, she just wasn't feeling. It was before she had all these things that she's doing now, which she's, you know, leads tours on the USS Hornet, and she is a docent at the Dunsmuir House in Oakland, and she does all these things. But then she was really feeling like she was kind of awash and adrift, and she said, you know, I don't have any objectives. I said, well, what you need to do is find out, what are you good at? What are you good at? And where is there a need? And where do those things intersect? And she said, well, you know, I'm good at, I've lost a lot of weight. I've been a Weight Watchers for a while. And kind of took an inventory. And I'm in Toastmasters. I've been winning awards for that. And what do you like to do? I also said, what do you like to do? She said, what gives you, follow your bliss. What gives you joy? What gives you a sense of satisfaction? She said, well, I like traveling, and I love taking cruises. Do you know what she did for the next 5 years? She was a traveling weight loss instructor on cruise ships. They paid her to take these trips and teach people, and she had all these adventures. Where in your life can you get in touch with what is your bliss? What is the joy? What is the joy in your heart? What is calling for it? I don't mean your momentary pleasure. I'm talking about something that really floats your boat, really stirs your soul, really gets you stirred up. And where's the need around you? And what are you good at? What are you good at? And letting that express, and letting it express in your own unique way. How do you let this light shine? You let your light shine every time you let your authentic self out. Every time you get in touch with the who that you are and let that part of yourself out. But it means moving past what we think is good into what's truly good. I remember my very first church was as I've shown before, the average age in the church was 80 when I got there. And it was a very traditional church. And I remember I came in and I would say something that I thought was funny, and one woman would laugh, and everybody would turn around and go, shh. And I'll never forget, afterwards, there were more people in rest homes than there were on Sunday morning when I first got there. And I remember saying, just at luncheon afterwards, with all the people around, I really enjoy going to the rest homes, visiting people. And a woman looked at me and says, enjoy? You shouldn't do it because you enjoy it, young man. You should do it because it's your duty. You know, so what is the joy within you? You know, what is the joy within you? We have an equation in our culture between goodness and something that, well, what did Oliver Wendell Holmes say? He said, I wouldn't become a minister except for they all acted like undertakers. You know, letting that joy out and expressing that joy and that spontaneity. And realizing that the universe is not complete without you. The universe is not complete without you. I am absolutely necessary for the existence of the universe. I'm going to say it alone. Don't say it with me. I am absolutely necessary for the existence of the universe. Together? I am absolutely necessary for the existence of the universe. Well, that's rather grandiose. The I am of you is. Not that ego that wants to argue with everybody and give everybody a hard time. The spiritual nature of you is absolutely necessary, because without you as the eyes of God, God wouldn't be whole and complete. The hands of God, the feet of God, the expression of God that you are. Without that, this universe wouldn't be what it is. So, do not not misunderstand why I've come, he says. I didn't come to do away with the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to complete their purpose. I'm telling you the truth. Heaven and earth could disappear, but not even the smallest detail of God's higher law will disappear until its purpose is fully achieved. So if you ignore the least commandment and teach others to do the same, you'll be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But everyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them will become great in the kingdom of heaven. And I'm warning you, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes of the religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh boy. Why then did he break all the laws? Because he kept breaking all the laws. The cleanliness laws and the washing of things laws and the hanging out with the wrong people laws and the healing people and doing stuff on the Sabbath laws and you name it. He was out there challenging it. He's talking about the higher law. He's saying the observance of the law is not the outer, it is the inner. And he said that over and over and over again. That it's something that we have to make a real part of ourselves, and it is not, it's a higher law, and the higher law transcends the lower law. That's why when they ask him, what's the greatest law? Is it that you shouldn't carry a burden on the Sabbath? So that when a tailor left a sewing needle in your clothes accidentally, and you walked around with a needle in your clothes, you were carrying a burden, and you had to go into the temple and offer a sacrifice because you had sinned. That was what they were thinking. Or again, if a person is sick, you could keep them from dying, but you couldn't do anything to make them any better on the Sabbath. Because that was working. What in the world? But we do that ourselves. We have these rigid ideas instead of letting that inner spirit come forth. So what is this? What is this indeed? This is moving from the ridiculousness of living our lives from the outer observance to the true living spirit of the inner being, the inner self, that inner nature of us. Now, who were the scribes and the Pharisees? They were the people who told everybody else how to live. And they had law books upon law books and commentaries on the law books, and it filled over 5 volumes. Hundreds and hundreds of pages. And I couldn't remember this stuff. You couldn't remember this stuff, so you had to hire a scribe who was essentially an attorney, a religious attorney, to tell you what you could and couldn't do. But they didn't agree with each other, so they were always arguing with each other over such niceties of the law of, can you pick up your baby on the Sabbath? And that was what religion had become. And Jesus is going and smashing it. The Buddha did the same thing in Hinduism. Hinduism had become so caste system and everybody having to do these sacrifices, and it was all outer observance. And the Buddha said, throw it all out. Get rid of all of it. We're not even going to talk about gods. I don't even want to talk about any deities or anything. We're just going to talk about stripping it down to its essence. And as a result, Hinduism reformed itself. And as a result of what Jesus did, Judaism reformed itself. And what we see today isn't anything like what he was dealing with, just as the Buddha had this incredible change in consciousness for his whole culture. And for you and for me, we are being called by the Christ of our being, our spiritual nature, the higher self of us, is calling for us to break free, to open the eggshell so we can get the good stuff out. And that's outer observances. There's nothing wrong with outer observances. You got to have some idea of what you're doing, but it's got to come from an inner place, not be so divorced from the inner experience that it just becomes this outer thing that you do in order to make yourself feel better or more superior than the other people. So he's really saying here 2 things. Motives are more important than actions. And it's coming up here now. We're going to get some tough stuff. And also that we are all equal. That no matter how spiritual we think we are, we've all got our stuff. And maybe I'm not going around hitting people over the head and taking their money. But I think some thoughts that are kind of like that. He gets kind of in that. The Pharisees were the separated ones because they had to live separate, because if they lived with other people, they'd be breaking laws all the time. So they had to make sure they didn't break the law, so they had to live separate. What kind of life is that? And Jesus always broke that as well. Okay. So the law of Moses. The law of Moses, what are the 10 commandments? A bunch of thou shalt nots. They're good, but they're very behavioral. They're steps to take. Jesus' laws were a direction to move in. They were spiritual, and they were very hard to get a hold of. very hard to grasp hold of. In the Methodist seminary, they tell the Methodist ministers that the Bible is baffling because it forces us to get in touch with our own intuitions and find out the Spirit of God within our hearts. Because if you try to take it from all the literal words, you'll go crazy. I mean, that's the Methodist church talking. It's an understanding that we have to move past the literality. So here he starts. You've heard our ancestors being told, you must not murder. Well, if you commit murder, you will be subject to judgment. But I'm saying that even if you are resentfully angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you say to someone, Raka, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you call someone a moron, moros, a name, you are in danger of the incinerators of Gehenna. They say fires of hell, but it's not hell. The word was Gehenna, which was the garbage dump in Jerusalem. You see, hundreds of years before, there were people who sacrificed babies in human sacrifice in this valley. It was a place where they did that kind of thing. So nobody wanted to live there, right? So they turned it into the garbage dump. And what did they do with their garbage? They incinerated it. And the fires of Gehenna burned night and day, and they were there to purify. It was not an eternal place of punishment. It was a place of purification in consciousness for us. And he's basically saying, not as some eternal thing. The fires are eternal because they went night and day. That's why they talk eternal fire. But it doesn't mean that you're going to be in there. It means that those aspects of your being that you fall into have to be purified. So what's he saying here? Well, first of all, he says, if you are resentfully angry with someone. There's two words in Greek for anger. One is kind of a flaring up, like a fast flame of brush or straw. That was not the word he used. He used one that was a long-term smoldering anger that included and went up to murder. It was a very resentful. It was long-term resentment. Long-term resentment. And then he says, if you say to someone, raka, I like to use the word that's actually there in Aramaic, raka. What does that mean? I'll give you a hint. In our culture, you probably only need one finger to use to say that word. And basically, in the traditional, they say it's thou fool, but it's way more than that. And so basically saying, don't call people names. You can tell people no. You can be strong. You can be assertive. You can even be disagreeable for a higher purpose, but don't just denigrate people and put them down. And the last one was call someone a moros or a moron, which is some, basically, how's that going to do any good for anybody? I mean, I might say to you, look, I don't like it when you do this, and this is how I feel about it. And I could just make you could be as angry as you want to with me about that. But if I say, you moros, what does that do for you? You suddenly just put up your walls, and it doesn't do any good. So he's saying that if you do that, then you get involved in the garbage dump in the valley of Hinnom, which is Gehenna, which is that place of purification. Guess that's what happens when we create something negative in our lives. It's got to be purified out of us. And that's what that means symbolically. Well, here we go. If you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that somebody has a grievance against you, leave your sacrifice at the altar, go and make amends to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. What is that? 12-step movement, that's making amends. It's taking an inventory. It's like, I'm going to do my spiritual work, but I got to get my stuff cleared out of the way first and get real about it and clean it up. It's not talking about having an enemy or having a disagreement or having somebody who didn't like something you did. It's talking about when somebody legitimately has a grievance against you that you need to make amends about. And why is that here, and what does that have to do with the 12-step movement? They were studying this book when they wrote the big book. Their whole idea of making amends came out of this very paragraph, which goes on, when you're on your way to court with your adversary, agree with your adversary quickly, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser will hand you to the judge, will hand you to the policeman, and you will be thrown into jail. And if that happens, you're not going to be free again until you paid the last penny. He's speaking poetically and symbolically here, not literally, but he's saying, basically, handle your stuff before it grows bigger. You remember when he healed Lazarus and brought him up from the dead? I mean, that was a big deal. But before he did, he cried and grieved Lazarus. He got in touch with his feelings and he let him out. He agreed with his adversary quickly, meaning he resolved the issue within himself so he could do the spiritual work. Then he could go to the altar and make the sacrifice or do the spiritual work. What am I saying here? I'm saying that we've got to be current with our issues and get in touch with what's really going on so that then we can, once we're clear about this stuff, then the spiritual stuff starts making a difference. So journal out your feelings. Get the stuff out. Let it go. Agree with your adversary quickly. And if you have an adverse situation in your life, one way to agree with your adversary quickly is to do what Martha Creek does. If she's got something coming up in her life that she really doesn't want to deal with, or a person that she's going to have to see that she really doesn't want to see, she says, I'm looking forward to it. Now, it sounds kind of phony, but it's not. It's basically shifting. I knew a person who had a day's worth of very unpleasant procedures ahead of them medically, and they just decided, they said, this is going to be the best day of my life. I have decided that I'm going to enjoy every minute of it. I'm going to find it to be an adventure. I'm going to be curious about everything, and I'm going to just enjoy the heck out of it. Now, what kind of attitude is that? They said they had the best time of their life because it was all just an adventure to them. It was like being in Oz. It was just, what is this? And at the end of the day, they went and had ice cream. So, without being phony about it, you can make a decision in your life to agree with your adversary quickly, to resolve the issues, to make amends, to deal with these kind of things, and to get out of the sticky gluiness. But what do we do instead? We get caught up in the sticky gluiness of experience, the adversary, the adversity in life. I've shared about when I was going through a really tough situation, and a woman came up to me on Sunday morning and says, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but last night I had a dream in which you were walking around in a cow pasture and you were picking up cow patties and stacking them in your arms. What do you think that means? I knew exactly what that meant. I was getting involved in other people's stuff and I was picking it up. I needed to agree with my adversary quickly and put that stuff down. And Robert Schuller, when I went to this small group seminar, he invited the local ministers to try out some ideas from a book he was doing. And after he tried out all those ideas, he took questions, and the minister raised his hands. What do I do when people are doing this and that and this and that? And he said, outlast them. I'm the old moon up in the sky. Dogs howl at it, dogs bark at it, but I let the old moon just keep on shining. And then he told us about the Los Angeles Times that had assigned a full-time reporter to do a 12-week series of exposés on Robert Schuller because he had a disgruntled ex-employee. But he said, I just wasn't defensive. I let him come in. I agreed with my adversary quickly. We answered all their questions. And the first couple of weeks were a little rough because there were some people who had some things to say. But as it went on and on and on, the reporter got in trouble with his newspaper because it was so favorable. Because he wasn't defensive, he was just letting everything out. Agree with your adversary quickly. Don't get caught up in it. Krishnamurti, the great teacher, said that his secret of peace of mind was, whatever happens, I don't mind it. Agree with your adversary quickly. That doesn't mean you don't have feelings, but process your feelings. Let them out, journal it, do what you got to do. But make up your mind that you're going to have a different experience in life. I'm going to live from a different place. I'm not going to let this stuff get me down. This isn't who I am. I'm not going to let that situation define the who that I am. Now I got to, unfortunately, read this one. You have heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with pornographic lust in his heart has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Okay, what's that about? What is that about? In their culture, they were very judgmental, the religious people, about the behavior of other people. And he was saying, don't be so fast to do that because everybody have thoughts. Everybody has thoughts, and thoughts are things. And don't think that you are better than everybody else just because you don't act on them. He's not really condemning people so much as saying, stop condemning people for their behavior when you have these thoughts. It's like that story, that one about the two Hindu monks, and a woman was had fallen into a ditch, and he helped her out and carried her out of the ditch, and he set her down, and they went along, and his friend would not talk to him and was just obviously angry. He says, tell me what's upsetting you. He says, we have taken a vow never to touch a woman, and you carried that woman. He says, yeah, but you've been carrying her ever since. I set her down. You know, there's that judgmental attitude moving past this and, moving to a more humble spot. So what he's doing here poetically is saying, don't put yourself above other people. Don't be judgmental because of other people's behavior, because we got it going on inside of us too. We may have grown to the place where we don't act it out, but we've got to deal with it too. And on the planet Earth, anything in the physical plane is sticky, gluey. So judge not, lest you be judged. Well, I'm going to go deeper into this on Tuesday night. So come to the Tuesday night. We're going to break into small groups. We're going to do our questions. Your questions are found in your bulletins. And we've got outside of fellowship all the questions for all 5 weeks. And we're going to discuss those, go in deeper, do meditation. I'll be answering questions and all the stuff that I couldn't talk about here, because there's a lot of juicy stuff here. That this isn't easy stuff, but Jesus wasn't easy. He just wasn't. It's like Moses' laws you can slurp through a straw. Jesus' you had to have teeth and chew them. So, you got to do some work here. All right, so take a deep breath and let it out. And just say, however I need to do it, I want to be real. I may have wanted to be good by what my parents or my priest or my grandma thought I should be, but what I really want to be is real. And I want to be authentic from within my own being and make the who that I am inside the same as my behavior on the outside. And so, God, grant me the humility that allows other people to make their mistakes, because as I've forgiven their debts, I am forgiven as well. As I judge not, I am not judged. The measure that I use is what is used with me. And so I make sure that I express with kindness, with gentleness, and I let go of that judging spirit. Thank you, God, that there but for the grace of God go I. And so it is. Amen. Take a deep breath and let it out, and set aside anything that you have in your hands, any paper. And open your hands up in a receptive mode and take another deep breath and let in the wonder of years and years, centuries of people focusing on the inner spirituality of these teachings, making it real for them and moving in their lives, moving in their hearts, not always living up to the ideals, but striving and trying their best. And recognize that you also are striving and trying your best, trying to make the inside of the cup like the outside of the cup, trying to make what you profess to believe real inside of you. Well, the only way to experience that is just to open up to it. The power that is greater than your personal self. Open up to it. Open up to the power that is greater than your personal awareness. Open up to it. Become aware and lift up into a power that is always moving, always expressing. But finally, we've taken the time to slow down enough to feel it, to touch into this presence of God. Jesus called this the salt of the earth, the saltiness that you can taste, the light of the world, the light that you can see, the reality that you can feel and experience and is a part of you, is who you are inside. God, we don't want a second-hand observance of outer rules and laws. We want to know and feel. We want to live the love that is the law. We want our hearts to open and break open and pour out the liquid molten love that is your spirit. We want to get out of the narrow confines of how we were raised and everything our culture says is good and true and beautiful, and we want to experience it inside ourselves, something more. Even if it sets us at odds with what's going on around us, we're willing to experience it, take that risk. God, we want to be real. We want to be authentic. We want to be our true selves. We want to let the passionate love that we are inside flow forth and express through everything we do. We want the who that we are to express through every experience in life. We want to lift up into that authenticity, that realness, that's something that we are. And grow and evolve and expand. So lift up, expand, embrace with your full heart. Be that shining diamond, that light of the world. Imagine it all around you, radiant, facets glimmering, gleaming. And just through doing this, everything changes within and without. Let go into that light of the world self that has sparkle and fire and salt and flavor. Feel it, see it, visualize it, know it, and let go into it. We are immersed in this spiritual essence. This is our true essence. It's not secondhand anymore. It's who we are. We let go into this flow and we move with it. Not observing something in the outside that we paste onto ourselves, but letting go, letting loose that inner spirit and splendor that wants to come out. So we just let it be, and we move with it, and so be it, and so it is.